Root on the high seas, Chewbacca in the outer rim, and a bunch more gaming announcements. I'm Matthew, and this is the What You Played news. Ahoy is the first game I've got for you this week, setting sail from my shelf about 5 feet away in Q4 this year because it looks pretty cool. Leader games are most famous for Root, the whimsical war game where lovable critters go on a rampage, then another rampage, then another one until everybody is vanquished. And there are also certainly similarities we found with Ahoy. Because in Ahoy, 2 to 4 players will be asymmetrically battling it out upon the high seas for points. Whether that's the smuggler shipping goods around or the bluefin squadron who want to keep control of different islands, keeping them away from the pesky mollusk union who will be firing cannons at everybody. Oh, and that's right, one of the factions are clan people and the other are literal sharks. All the players and factions will be playing their own game, trying to achieve their own objectives and goals to score points in their own way, all while the other factions do their own thing. Only with so many conflicting interests at play upon the waters, not everybody will be able to stay afloat as players get in each other's way, even while the board grows through the exploration of 2x2 modular tiles. Ahoy is being marketed as a slightly more accessible game than Root, and I for one am very excited to give it a go. Something else to explore is the message from the folks that in part made this episode possible. Legendary, The Spy Who Loved Me, a James Bond deck building game expansion from Upper Deck. This new expansion follows the plot of the classic film The Spy Who Loved Me, recreating iconic scenes and chases both on land and underwater as you foil notorious villains, complete epic missions and encounter all new perils, events that force Bond into traps and dangerous scenarios, be they shark pits or flamethrowers. And Q has some new keywords for Bond. Nobody Does It Better emphasises Bond's ability to adapt in any situation when played. These cards become any class you'd like them to be. The villain, Jaws, brings a mean pair of new keywords which can quickly KO comrades he confronts, and new indestructible villains escape after being defeated instead of being added to a player's victory pile. Legendary, The Spy Who Loved Me, a James Bond deck building game expansion, becomes available on April 13th, and your next mission is to find it at your local friendly game store and upperdeckstore.com. A little while ago, Fantasy Flight announced, after being asked thousands of times, that they were indeed bringing us an expansion to Star Wars Outer Rim. They didn't, however, tell us much more about it other than the title, Unfinished Business. In Outer Rim, you take on the role of an underworld denizen setting out to make your mark on the galaxy, travelling about in your personal ship, hiring Star Wars characters to join your crew while you try to become the most famous or infamous outlaw in the galaxy. Star Wars Outer Rim Unfinished Business, however, will be out on June the 6th. Okay, we do know more. The expansion will add more characters, more ships, more bounties, equipment, missions, and there are now core worlds on the board for you to visit. But most importantly, you can play as Chewbacca, as well as there being benefits of putting bounties on members of other players' crews. More stuff for Outer Rim seems to be what people wanted, and this expansion proves that Fantasy Flight agreed that there was indeed unfinished business. Leviathan Wilds is the next game that grabbed my attention from Mooncrab Games, who, as a side note, have one of the best logos ever. A while ago, some designers and developers from Fantasy Flight and Z-Man Games founded their own studio, Mooncrab Games. They were people who had credits on games like Pandemic to Descent, and their first game, which will be heading to Kickstarter later this year, is Leviathan Wilds. We're told that long ago, the once gentle Leviathans lost their minds and tore the world apart. And after generations of hiding and struggle, humanity discovered that the frenzied Leviathans can be restored. Climbers willing to take on this risk must explore the wilds and world together to remove a series of binding crystals to heal the Leviathans roaming the world. And this involves 2 to 4 players confronting a Leviathan, which will be depicted across the spread of a spiral-bound storybook that makes up the game's board. The book also forms the basis of a connected campaign mode built around the game's story, with each of 20 included scenarios estimated to take around 45 minutes, and tougher difficulty levels are also available for added replayability. The characters are each unique, as are the Leviathans, and you'll be climbing their colossal bodies to deplete the crystals controlling them before it defeats you. It looks cool and has pedigree to boot, so I'm up for some colossal monster hunting. It's actually just my inner demons that terrify me. WizKids made a bunch of announcements, and if I had to pick just one to get excited about, it would be Dungeons and Dragons Onslaught. I don't have to pick just one. There's more coming up, but that's not. But D&D Onslaught is a new 2-player competitive skirmish game where each player controls an adventuring party from one of the powerful factions of the Forgotten Realms, and you'll be delving into dungeons to both battle rival adventurers as well as confront monsters as you quest for treasure and glory. And all that made me go, ooh. Dungeons and Dragons Onslaught, we are told, is going to be a scenario-based combat game. You'll hunt for treasure, but also level up D&D style, increasing your powerful dice-driven abilities. I'm excited to see how liberal any character creation will be down the line. Can I make my actual D&D party at some point? Who knows? But what we do know is that the core set includes 12 characters from 2 factions, Harpers and Zentarium, and a horde of monsters when it's released later this year. In the quickfire news section, we have a bunch of announcements, starting with Ready, Set, Bet, a game from AEG and John D. Clare, where you and your friends head to the races for a day of cheering, jeering and betting on your favourite horses, whose fates hang on every roll of the dice over the 4 rounds of racing and resolution. There's a real-time element to this one, which is what excited me about it, as well as the fact that it plays up to 9 players. AEG also announced That Old Wallpaper, where 2 to 4 players attempt to recover a wall of a house with wallpaper, matching as many patterns as possible as you can in this card-laying, pattern-puzzling kind of way, which looks pretty charming to me, as well as charmingly pretty. Devere Games, who are one of my must-check-out publishers, have announced Walkie Talkie, a cooperative party game for 2 to 8 players where you want to get rid of all your cards as quickly as possible, but you only have 30 seconds per player to do it. There's a pile of coloured cards on the table and next to a pile of letters. In order to get rid of a card from your hand, a player must say a word that starts with a letter and matches the colour of the card that they wish to play. And it sounds simple, doesn't it? Until your brain betrays you and you forget the word banana. And just as it would be if it ever actually happened to me, which it won't, there's the unexpected wedding. I told my friend Paula about this Jane Austen inspired D&D 5th edition compatible role-playing game where everyone is invited to a wedding, but someone finds a dead body, and she immediately backed it on Kickstarter, the Kickstarter that's running until April 21st. The game focuses on the mystery, story and role-playing aspects of play, though there are some magical items and monsters to be found. But all in all, it looks like a great place to take your adventuring party for a fancy detour from all their Dungeons and Dragons. And finally, WizKids also announced, or rather displayed at the recent Gamma trade show, a roster of Marvel games. The first being Marvel Remix, a re-implementation of Fantasy Realms, which is a rummy-style card game where you are trying to make the best hand of cards to score the most points. The original Fantasy Realms is just brilliant. They recently released a Star Trek version called Star Trek Missions, which did change the original game and wasn't a straight reskin, so most likely this Marvel Remix version will also be changing up the classic formula as well. But gosh, if you've never played Fantasy Realms, then please do. It's frankly a ridiculous game and I love it. Marvel Age of Heroes was incredibly lightly teased for release in October. This one really was just a very lovely looking box cover featuring what looks to be the classic 90s cartoon X-Men roster on the front, which also happens to be where my superhero knowledge starts and finishes, so that really interests me. As well as it's by Rodney Thompson, who co-designed Lords of Waterdeep. And Marvel Rock Paper Heroes was announced. Sorry, the full name is Marvel Rock Paper Heroes Enter the Danger Room, which is a great title, let's be real. It's a re-implementation of Dungeons and Dragons Rock Paper Wizard, where you'll be frantically throwing hand gestures that represent the powerful mutant abilities of 8 iconic heroes who are all training to become protectors of mutant kind. At least that's what they told me those gestures meant when I confronted them about it, but Rock Paper Heroes is slated for June. And that's the news, but for more Watch It Play goodness, you can go over here to see what Chaz is unwrapping with Mementen. But until next time, see ya.